Hi everyone, welcome to the last live session. It's been great, but unfortunately we have to come to an end at some point. So today we're going to be talking about the main, not all, but some of the main aspects of the music industry. So we're covering a few different topics, having a bit of a discussion, and yeah. So I'm Nicola, and I'm going to be talking about a bit about copyright and PRS, PPL. If you haven't heard about those, don't worry, I'll go into a bit of detail. EJ, Victoria, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm EJ. I'm going to be talking about going independent and the pros and cons and some tips for being an independent artist.
Hi, and I'm Victoria, and I'm going to be talking about record labels, so indies versus majors, and a little bit about music management.
Lovely, cool. So, copyright, what is it? We've heard it so many times. Some people don't really know what it is. So it's a legal right that protects the use of your work once your idea has been expressed physically. So, for example, if you write it out on sheet music, or you record like a performance of it on your phone, or if you want to go into a studio and record it, that's basically what it is. So in order for your work to be protected by copyright law, it needs to be original and needs to be tangible. So original meaning that the work is your own and it's not basically a replica of someone else's work. And tangible meaning that you need to express the idea in physical form. So it's only copyright protected once it is, notated or recording of the performance has been, made. It's not enough to just think, oh yeah, I've got this idea in my head. There's nothing, you can't copyright that. It has to be a physical thing. So a really interesting thing that I learned a while ago is that if the copyright for a work or a piece of music has expired, you'll not basically get in trouble for using it. So for example, if there's like a piece, like a really old classical piece, that maybe an artist has sampled in their music, you hear that a lot in pop music. They probably wouldn't have got in trouble for it because the copyright expired. But a thing that is important to remember is that if, for example, someone hears a riff or a part of a song on the radio or like a record shop that sounds familiar, as in you think that oh, I've seen that. If you can prove that it was originally written by you, then you'll have a potential case and will be able to take further action, no matter how small the part was. So that's interesting, but obviously you've got to make sure that you have like enough proof to prove that. Some of the popular methods, I'm sure EJ and Victoria would have heard of this, of copywriting your music is basically posting copies yourself in like a sealed registered envelope with obtaining like a stamped date post office receipt and then basically keeping it unopened in a safe place in case you ever need it for evidence. So have you guys ever done that?
Yeah, I did once. Like 6 years ago or something with a few songs.
Yeah. But yeah, another way you could do it is basically just giving it to a lawyer or accountant or another professional in return for like a dated receipt, and it's just like proof that you've copyrighted it. What was the other thing? So there are two types of copyright. So you have the song and composition itself, so the music and words in the original form, which can be recorded many times, and it's usually owned by the composer and author, and often assigned to a publisher. And then you've also got the recording, so the master, as it's also known. There's a sound recording, and it's usually owned by the producer or whoever makes the arrangements for the recording to be made, and it's kind of owned by a label. But the difference between a sound recording and song copyright is that you basically want to look at how each copyright generates like money and royalties. So for example, if Radio 1 plays a band single on air, then the writers of the song or their publishers get a royalty and money for the use of the copyright of the song. But their record company will also get a royalty for the use of their copyright of the recording. So writers get paid, and the label who own the recording of the song will get paid too. But it then changes because if Radio 1 wants to basically bring a band in to record the single at, Maida Vale Studios, then a royalty is still paid to the writers of the song, but the record company won't get any money, won't get a royalty, because Radio 1 hasn't used their recording, if that makes sense. So that's kind of interesting to know. But another way of kind of copywriting your song is kind of through PRS as well. So PRS is basically Society of Songwriters, Composers and Music Publishers. It stands for Performing Rights Society, and it costs £100 to join as a writer composer, but once you pay that £100, you've got the membership and you don't need to pay again. I think it used to be 50. I'm not too sure why it's gone up. Do you guys know why?
I signed up such a long time ago that I don't know. I haven't.
Yeah, so I don't know why they decided to up it. Maybe it's more important now to do it than ever. Who knows? But so yeah, they license like organisations, places to like play, perform the music on behalf of like the people who sign up for the the members, and basically ensure that whoever is paying these artists for their music, they get basically the royalties paid to them fairly and efficiently. So you often see, if you go into like restaurants or pubs, if you're old enough to go into a pub, like a sticker on the window, it's like PRS, so basically they're allowed to play the music. And if an artist goes into a pub or if they go into a restaurant and they play music, then they can basically earn money from that. It might not be massive, it depends on where you are, but I don't know if Victoria or EJ, have you ever been paid through PRS for a gig or something like that?
Yeah, so I get like a quarterly payment into my bank account from PRS and PPL, and yeah, like you said, so it's radio. It's also lots of my songs get played in like shopping malls and shopping centres. So it's whenever it's being used. If it's used like YouTube, all of the streaming services, everything. So there are lots of little ways of getting revenue from that.
Cool. So yeah, you just mentioned PPL, so we'll go into that. So PPL stands for Phonographic Performance Limited. You don't really need to know PPL, but it basically earns money for you if you own the recording copyright or if you performed on the track. So let's say you went to the studio and you had a session drummer come in and the recorded drums for you, and you released it, or you perform it live, then you can basically they can earn money from it. So that's pretty cool as well. And especially if you're a performing songwriter and you've sung or played guitar as well on your track, then you get money that as well. So that's cool. So yeah, PPL deals with like the recording side of copyright, and it licenses recorded music played and broadcasted. It's a non-profit organisation and it's free to join, which is good. But yeah, so songwriters earn separately through PRS, so you get basically two payments. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's worth signing up to it if obviously you feel like you're at that stage. Definitely PRS is worth it. I kind of feel like once my songs have been registered on PRS, it's kind of like official, like those are my songs kind of thing. So obviously hoping I had plagiarised without realising it. Obviously I would never plagiarise, but once that song is on there, it's yours. I feel. I don't know if everyone else has probably got that security. I know you say you can copyright once it's been physically expressed, but I always like the knowing that I've got it on PRS. And it's like cool, right, done. But yeah, so that always helps.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You mentioned. So you mentioned being a session musician. How would you or Victoria say, a way to get into being a session musician?
Victoria, would you like to start?
Yeah, so the very first bit of session work that I got actually was I was performing for the music service at a concert. I think I was 15 or 16 at the William Craig Theatre, and a producer came up to me and my mum afterwards, obviously checked with my parents first, which is the way that it should be. If you're under 18, you should 100% get your parent or guardian to be checking in on these things with you. And he just said, you know what, I really love your voice. Would you like to come in and do some sessions for me? And I ended up doing backing vocals for karaoke tracks. and a couple of radio adverts. And it's one of those things, session work. Once you kind of get your foot in the door, everything else kind of opens for you. But what I would definitely say is, for me personally, in the work that I've got, it's been mainly through doing lots of gigs, function gigs, open mic nights, mixing with lots of other musicians and lots of different types of people in the music industry. There's no one easy way into session work. It's just about being part of a network. And we talked about this before in previous videos, then just being super professional and super ready and having all those skills, and then people are happy to kind of refer you and pass you on to other people as well.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, you've kind of got to really go for it and just try and find the opportunities as well, like being able to shake hands with, okay, you can't shake hands with people right now in coronavirus situation, but you know what I mean, being able to shake hands with the right people and just getting yourself out there, you know, speaking to people, going to networking events if you can. And I think also if you're, you know, very, you know, present on social media and stuff like that, your social media's got to be pretty good nowadays, because we all spend so much time looking at things on social media. Everyone posts covers and, you know, videos of them playing. You know, I think you've kind of just got to be very professional, both in the way that, you know, in the way that you react to people and, you know, how you look, not necessarily your image, but I mean, you know, you're actively putting stuff out.
How you present yourself as well,
yeah,
and your brand.
Exactly, yeah, that's very important as well. And just showing that you know what you're doing, and, you know, I think, yeah, just being able to get yourself out there as much as you can. I think, because especially,
even if you play, like say if you play the guitar or bass or something that's that you just need, like you could have that instrument and a singer, then you could do that even for a friend, and if it's on their social media, then they see that you play, and people like it, and then they need someone to play the guitar for them, and then that's also how you can get into it more kind of simple and using the people you already know way.
Yeah, that's really important. Definitely. Cool.
Is it
amazing?
I think Victoria.
Yeah. So I wanted to have a bit of a chat about record labels, kind of the difference between majors and indies, and just kind of a bit of discussion about that. So there's kind of three, or what we call in the industry the big three of majors, and that's Universal Music Group, Sony Music Entertainment, and Warner Music Group. And there's some kind of subsidiaries off of those that kind of are other major labels. But I guess the main thing with a major in comparison to an indie is probably the budgets and the money that they have to spend on their artists. So which doesn't mean that people from who sign an indie deal can't blow up and become massive. It's quite an interesting one, actually, I think, with the comparison. But definitely with majors, I think it's kind of the budget and the reach that they have. When you have an artist on a major label, they'll often kind of be promoted internationally, and there'll be lots of money put towards their kind of recording costs and on their PR and all of their promotion and that kind of thing. But for the artists themselves, it usually means that you get a smaller split. So it's usually between 13 and 20% of like your record sales splits. Whereas with an indie, which is sometimes they're called kind of artist friendly labels, most indie deals tend to be 50-50. They're really kind of in favor of the artist, which is why some artists, even though they're huge, want to be on indie labels, because if you've already got that presence yourself, you can actually make a better living being on an indie. The other thing with majors and indie labels as well is that you get, when you sign a record deal, you tend to get an advance. So that's not free money or anything like that. It's an advance on the kind of record sales that you're going to make. So that money has to be recouped and has to be paid back. Usually with a major, you'd get a much bigger advance. And again, as I said, that can go towards things like paying for your recording costs, or paying for photo shoots, or for stylists, or whatever, all the things that it might take to kind of get you to where you want to be as an artist. Indies tend to have smaller advances for their artists, but that in a positive way, it does mean that then if you do really well on an indie, you can pay or you can recoup that advance much more quickly and then kind of start to earn more money off of your record. The other things with indies as well is that they tend to give artists, not always, but they tend to give artists a little bit more creative control. So this means that they're kind of usually willing to work with an artist to kind of, you know, help them realize their own vision and their own dream rather than pushing them down a certain route. So with majors, it tends to be kind of more mainstream music. Some people say that any label that doesn't release mainstream music is an indie label. So, you know, if you're really a bit more abstract and you've got a slightly more unique and original sound, then you might think that actually, you know what, a major really, despite all of the money and everything else, you might think, you know what, actually a major isn't really for me and I'd rather be on an indie label. The other things with indies as well is that they tend to look at developing an artist a little bit more, so they're less concerned with getting that number one hit straight away. So I've got quite a few friends who have signed to majors who have either been what we call shelved. So that means their music doesn't get released. So they're sat there for ages kind of waiting. Sometimes majors will sign lots of artists that are similar to an artist that they already have on their label, and what's called shelve them, or keep them kind of there so that they're not in competition with their other artists. There's lots of things to think about when you're signing in that way. And then, as I said, if you don't get those 5 number ones or 5 top 10s straight away from your first album, then you can be dropped. You see this a lot with people from the X Factor. It's so like common, or from The Voice, you know, the headline will be £1 million record deal or whatever. The artist won't get all of that money. That will be all towards the PR and everything else. And then if that single doesn't do well, then they'll be dropped the next month. Whereas with indie labels, they tend to, it's a slow burner. So they're looking at really developing an artist and, you know, building up. It's more of that kind of cult following. So people like Bonobo and Quantic and all these kind of artists that have taken their time to kind of really build. Alice Russell is another really good one to really build their careers. Tend to do indie deals, especially initially, and then, you know, once they've got that presence, they might then decide to go to a major because of that reach, because of that international appeal that major labels have. It's a really difficult one. I think as an artist, you have to weigh up the pros and cons of the two. There's definitely loads of pros with being with a major. As I said, it's that money and it's that backing behind you to really break an artist. Majors have that ability to put an artist on every single, you know, TV channel and on the Graham Norton show and on this and on that, and you know, on Radio 1 playlist. They've got all of that money to pay radio pluggers and PR people and everything else. But you could find that you might be doing music that you're not that keen on, or music that isn't really a representative of who you are as an artist. You know, you might find that you have a little bit of creative control in what you wear, that kind of thing. Your stylist, a lot of those things might be decided for you. And this isn't the case with every single major. This is just, you know, kind of the typical or the kind of perceived pros and cons. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on the major indie.
I've heard everything you've said, but I think with major labels, especially with the way things are now and how a lot of artists are kind of going with indie labels or doing a lot themselves, that major labels aren't really doing any artist development. They're not really interested in maybe, you know, spending all that money to develop an artist. And if they are, you've kind of got to be a bit business savvy with record labels and kind of know what you're doing, because you can get sucked into it and maybe sign a deal that, you know, you don't really know. You hear all sorts of like horror stories or stuff like that. You know, artists get, you know, in trouble. They, you know, sign something they didn't want, and, you know, it's a big hoo-ha. But that's why you should always seek, you know, legal help or speak to a lawyer to check with any contracts or, you know, anyone that, you know, is going to be able to help you out with that stuff. And have a good support group around you, and friends, or, you know, like I said, people that you know might know in the industry who, it's a big decision, because there could potentially be a lot of money, you know, what's the word, exposure, you know, on the table, and you don't really want to get that wrong if you you know you can afford not to. But yeah, so I think artists, major labels kind of want to see, from what I've understood, an artist bubbling and kind of already doing things. Then they'll go in and be like, okay, cool. And I feel like, and I might be wrong in this case, so please tell me if you know you've heard otherwise. I think artists, you know, they can kind of, once they are bubbling, there's only so much, you know, a label can change about them. Because if they've got this following, and I mean like a decent following, and they're, you know, out gigging and they've got a name themselves, maybe they've been on BBC introducing and stuff like that, then if they've got a good thing going already and a label comes in and changes it, then all that work is kind of, they've got to start from scratch. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. A very close friend of mine signed to a major not that long ago, maybe a year or so, and he hadn't really released any. He'd been working as a musician for a really long time, but hadn't really released any music. And he's really assertive and really sure about who he is and what his sound is and everything else. And he's been really picky about, you know, which his A&Rs and who he's working with and the vision and everything else. And he's really put his foot down. And I think, like you were saying, I think it has changed to an extent, but ultimately I think with a major is that they still really can, I mean, and all labels, not just majors, can stand firm on what they will or won't release, because ultimately it's their money. And it's tricky. And I think the problem with, and this is the amazing thing about the internet, and things like BBC introducing, but there are so many artists now that have had a play on BBC introducing, or, you know, might be able to sell out like a 200 capacity local gig, you know what I mean? There's lots of those people already. And I think sometimes with majors, or sometimes with any label, but sometimes with majors, it's easy to then for them to drop and chop and change, because there are so many people already waiting in the wings. And I think that's when you can maybe, as an artist, I mean, I don't know, I'm on an indie label myself, but I think that's maybe as an artist you can really feel that pressure to conform, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. And what do those artists do when they've been shelved? What happens for them then?
Well, if you're tied into a deal and you're not allowed to release, because there's lots of exclusivity clauses in deals. This is why it's really important to go with to get a really good music lawyer, someone that you really trust. Lots of people, well, some people that I know have signed deals and then not been able to release music until the term of their contract is at an end, and that is also really frustrating if that's what you want to be doing. So it is really important to think and to really trust in the people that are in your team and that you're working with, and be really sure about and have lots of meetings. If you've got a good manager, which is what we're going to move on to with management. If you've got a good manager, and I've been really lucky with both of my managers, and I'll kind of discuss their pros and cons to each of them. Hopefully they don't watch this. But if you have a good manager, then the idea is that you should hopefully be going to lots and lots of meetings before you sign a deal. Before I signed my first deal, I was really lucky to go to meetings with majors and with indies, and you be brave enough to ask questions and to have really open conversations, and to kind of figure out what the expectation is of you. Because I know for me, as a 22-year-old just out of university, I had no idea, and it was quite intimidating to walk into these big, that's your I don't know, but for me that was like my dream from when I was 5 years old, that I wanted to be a singer. So when you're walking into these places, you suddenly feel the pressure and the weight of the world, and that's where managers are amazing. So let's talk about managers and management. So I guess there's two kind of real different types of managers that you can kind of go for. One is that you can go for someone who has loads and loads of industry experience, has kind of been been in management for years and years and years, maybe has worked at labels, that kind of thing. So someone who's really old school, kind of just knows the industry inside out. And then on the flip side of that, you can have the kind of real young, full of energy go-getters who might not have quite as much experience, but they're really hungry and they really want to work for you, and they really maybe have some of those kind of cool connections because they're maybe a little bit younger and that kind of thing. And I think I've been really lucky that I've had like both sides of the coin. So both of my managers kind of have both of those elements. But you definitely want to have a manager who you trust. And the most important thing I would say first and foremost is that, again, we've talked about this, is like you shouldn't sign anything that you don't feel comfortable signing. Go to a music lawyer. With most, you should kind of have like a 6-month period where you both see if you're a good fit for each other. So we talked about this with collaboration. It's very similar when you're working in a team, and it's the same with if you decide to get an agent. Have a bit of a working relationship first and see if you all gel and all work together first and foremost before you get carried away with signing things and, you know, not signing things and everything else. Because if you do sign a deal with the manager, there's something generally that's called a sunset clause, which means that any money that you make during that period that they were managing you. So say I made an album 10 years ago with an old manager that then now I'm not working with, any revenue from that album, you still have to pay your 20% to that manager despite maybe parting ways with them. So it's really important to get a good feel. AJ, I know that you've had a bit of experience working with managers. Did you have anything to add about that kind of trial period?
Yeah, it's interesting because I met mine through like a friend of a friend, and we didn't have an official agreement yet. So it was like a trial period, but also it wasn't really said that it was, but then it did come to an end. So I think like hearing that there can be that trial period, I think it would be really useful, because then you don't feel as much pressure to make it work if it's naturally maybe not the best fit. And yeah, I think there's so many things to think about when you have a manager, and the different things that you feel that you need, or even just about the way you communicate. It's really important, because you might like to talk more or in a certain way, but they might like to talk in a different way. And then and especially if you're talking even just like on message and text and stuff, and then things can be misconstrued. So there's a lot with communication, I think, that can be quite detrimental to your relationship and the goals that you share. So even things like having more phone calls or meeting up more, I think can help. Definitely, I wouldn't rush into anything with the manager. And kind of, even if you really like them as a person, because you can really like them as a person, but they're not as your manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think as well, they're also there. What you have to remember with your management as well is that they're representing you. So quite often it'll just be your managers that go into a meeting with your demos or whatever, and you need to trust that they are going to be super professional in a meeting. They're going to know what they're talking about. They're going to turn up on time, all of these things, because ultimately a big chunk of your career is in their hands. And that's where, you know, there's lots of artists that I know who, you know, initially didn't feel like they need a manager, because I think the other thing you need to remember as well is that you're also going to be paying them 20% of your income. So if there's things that you feel that, you know, you can do yourself, especially when you're starting out, you might feel that you might not need a manager. You're able to manage everything yourself, especially if you maybe have a really strong music network and you have kind of connections maybe to other labels, and some indies actually aren't that fussed or that keen on you having a manager. They're quite happy to kind of help take on that management role. You might have a really good friend who wants to get involved in the music industry, who you really trust, who you might want to get to jump on board to kind of trial being your manager, because sometimes it can be really good to send music off and it be not from you and from, just sometimes gives it that little edge of being a bit professional. But you know, there's no particular credentials that you need for someone to be your manager, and I think that's a pro and a con. So just be really aware when you're meeting people. Some people will say they're music managers and they're not really, they don't have that much experience. And then, you know, and then some people might be just, it might be your dad, you might be Beyonce, you know, you might be Miley Cyrus, whatever it is. Like, it might be your dad that has all this really great business knowledge that they can transfer over into being your music manager. And that can be particularly good as well if you're, you know, under 18. And you know, you want someone that you really, really trust and you really know really well. Yeah,
and I think it's really important to make sure that they share your your vision, and that you communicate that really well, and that like even what you're saying about how they represent you is so important, because if even the language they use, and if you're over 18 and you like, I don't know, have a certain way that you want to be represented, or even just things like sometimes there can be quite a hierarchical thing in the music industry, with people who are much older and have had a lot of experience working with people who are younger, if they're in their early 20s, and when they talk about you might be a little bit belittling and degrading. So you want to make sure that whoever's representing you doesn't fall into that, and talks about you in a way that you feel comfortable with. And
yeah, that's so important. And I think that's probably a good place to leave it with managers. I think they're leaving the kind of final thoughts, like you said, EJ, just that it's really important that you feel comfortable with them, that they understand who you are as an artist, and also that they're a fan of your music. Because ultimately, if they don't really believe in the vision of who you are, it's not really going to work. And again, like you were saying, EJ, the other thing that I think is important to remember is that you're paying them. So even though the word is manager, they work for you. So just remember that as well. You know, it's really good to have all the knowledge and all of the wisdom, but I think, and we've said it before, sometimes you really have to go with your gut and have what's the word that I'm looking for, and kind of have just to be assertive and to be able to say, actually, you know what, this is my music or my vision, and I've taken what you're saying, and I'm listening and I've weighed it up, but this is really how I feel. And I think your managers always have to kind of hit that kind of right balancing act with you.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay,
Lovely. Thanks. Over to EJ now.
Cool. So some things have been talked about, but I'll try and make sure nothing's repeated. But yeah, so in terms of being an independent artist, obviously that means not being with any label and kind of doing it on your own or with a small team. And yeah, people are doing this a lot more nowadays than say like 10, 15 years ago. So I thought we could discuss some of the pros and cons of being an independent artist. So maybe if I say a point and then you can feed in if you want to. So yeah, the first one, obvious one, is you can release your music in your own time and in your own way. So in the very start of your career, you can be self-sufficient and truly think about what artist you want to be, how you want to present your image and brand, and even your marketing strategy. But then I'd say a con of that is that it can be difficult to do that, and it can take a lot of trial and error. And sometimes you might make mistakes or have to learn things in different ways or reach out to people that take a long time to get back to you. So yeah, there's definitely pros and cons with that one. Do you guys have anything to contribute?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, especially like being an artist that is, self-releasing, there are so many things that you've got to consider. And, especially when you are releasing a song, it's not just releasing the song, getting it recorded. It is the brand image, it is the marketing, it is the social media, radio plugging. There's so many things to do with. Obviously, if you have a team or if you're signed to a label, then obviously they will have specific people that will take care of those things. And obviously, if you are in that situation, I think it's probably good to have an idea of what's going on with those things anyway. Just because, I would like to be at least involved and know what is going on with those things instead of just leaving it to someone else to do. Just because I quite like being involved with it. But yeah, obviously it can be quite time consuming, like you said, and a bit overwhelming, like, oh God, I've just got to do this as well, I've got to do that. And I've got this. Some people are really naturally good at it and they can just take it on, like you said. But yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, I think.
I think as well, there's so much, which is amazing. There's so much music and there's so many people self-releasing that it's sometimes you have to find a way to make sure that you're heard above all of the noise and above the crowd. And I think that can sometimes be a really difficult thing. And I have a really good friend who she just had loads of post-it notes, and she like would write little like notes like, hey, like da da da, and then like my song's coming up, blah, blah. And I don't know if you're allowed to do this, I don't know if this is like littering or whatever, but she'd stick them up like around towns or like around her uni or whatever. They'd be absolutely everywhere, so people would pick them up. And it's I think when you're self-releasing and you don't have the budget, it's about finding those really clever ways to get your name out there and get your music out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And then just to note that PRS has had a like massive influx of unsigned artists with membership, now almost at 130,000. Although that might have been last year's stats. So it does seem that this is kind of like the future of the music industry. And I mean, that could be a whole topic in itself, where the music industry is going.
Where's it going?
So yeah, I think one of the main pros of it is that the power is in your hands. And if you sign to a label, then they take a cut of your revenue. I think I read somewhere that they make 5 times the amount of profit than you make, which is pretty crazy. And what else did I say? Yeah, so also it can take a lot more time. And in terms of like getting contacts and like being in the right circles, or if you've released something and then you need to do your next song and the next one, do you have those people around you, or do you have the means to contact those people? And where do you find them? And obviously it's harder now with coronavirus, but hopefully as things kind of open up more, and that will get easier. So I think there's just a lot of things to consider. But then at the same time, you can release something, and then if it doesn't go how you expected, there's not too much harm in that. So I think being open to it as well, or even having like friends around that you can help support you, just like with talking about how your release is going, or having a little like marketing team of people. Or I released a song in March, so it was kind of, I think it was beginning of lockdown, and I did a Zoom launch party, which was so fun, and I just invited like kind of friends and family, and I sang a few songs, and then they like sang along in the chorus and stuff. So there are definitely creative things you can do, even just to help you feel like, you know, you're connecting people to your music. And yeah, like Victoria said about finding like different creative ways to do that. But yeah, I think you really need to research and figure out all the different things, or even like there's a musicians union that you can sign up to and then ask for advice. So I did that at the beginning of the year, just had a phone call with someone and had a list of questions that I didn't have answers to, and then they helped me, and they can kind of signpost you to different services. So yeah, and then before I move on to tips, do you guys have anything to say?
No, I think that
I think you covered it too. Yeah,
cool. So yeah, just a few tips. So the first one, which you've talked about, is have a team in place. Again, even if it's just a couple of people, or you can actually I don't know how legit this is, but a lot of people do it. You can set up a different email address and then just pretend that that's your, like, I don't know, management, or that's your representative. And it's like, yes, EJ would love to do this. And it just makes you seem a little bit more professional, I guess.
Yeah. Just to jump in on that as well, I remember when we were doing like the business module in my degree, it was saying like whenever you're writing a bio, for example, always speak like the third person.
Yeah.
Like EJ is a songwriter, or Victoria is, you know, same kind of thing. It just kind of sounds professional. Yeah,
definitely. Also, like even researching about bios and what's it called? Press kits as well. All of these things that you might not even realize, but then as you start researching about self-releasing, then you'll find them out. So make sure you're kind of knowledgeable on that stuff, either like just before your release, or rather than as you go along. So you want to be able to speak to a lawyer, so that you'll be represented if you do have anyone coming forward to you. Also, you can do things like, you can still be independent, but then have a live agent that can help get you gigs. And then obviously that can become part of your small team. And then just making like the best music that you can, and kind of sharing it. There's lots of different platforms you can use to get your music out there and get like editors and people from magazines and blogs to listen to it, that can give you feedback as well. I think there's one called, what's it called? Submit Hub or something. Do you guys?
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. But even a simple Google on it will help. And then Nicola, you told me about one last time. It was a soul one. Do you remember?
Oh gosh, it's gone from my head.
Oh, maybe we'll remember it later. But there's things like, depending on which genre your music is, that you can send, and then get feedback or get a blog written about it or something. That can be
I remember. It was I think it's The House That Soul Built.
Yeah.
I think it was called.
Okay.
That's the one.
Yeah. And then the last thing is to go out and do gigs, because obviously that's really good for exposure, depending on what you're doing, but even like for meeting other musicians or people who are just kind of more similar to you that you might not meet in day-to-day life, and things like even open mics, and you can contact bars and small venues with links to your work and social media channels. But at the same time, when you do that, you want to kind of make sure that you are unique in how you're putting yourself forward. So try not to say something that you think everyone's saying, like I'm influenced by the Beatles and Rolling Stone, because you want to be different, and you want them to kind of have that incentive to click on what you've sent, and it not just be in a pile of other emails that they receive. And then one of this is a quote from Ravina, who is a singer-songwriter and musician, and she said, "You have to be assertive and clear-headed in your own vision to end up with art that is completely unique, and it takes an immense amount of communication and patience making the vision that lives inside your head," which kind of relate to, and it can take time and patience, and try not to feel like, I don't know, you want to have a song out by next week or next month, and you just know in your heart that it's not ready. So you want to be honest with yourself as well about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the advice I've been given, because like I mentioned before at the start of these sessions, is that I've kind of gone a bit of a zigzag and a bit of a roller coaster in terms of what genre or kind of direction I want my music to go in. And everyone just said to me, don't rush, especially because I'm kind of, I think it's maybe the second year out of uni now, I can't remember, but there is time, as long as you're kind of being proactive about it, and you're not just kind of you're taking steps each day to move things forward. There is no rush. Like Ian said, you could try and plan to have a song out next week, next month, whenever it is. When you come to it and you think, oh, you know what, it's not ready. No, and obviously the important thing to kind of write, and it takes a while, is knowing when something's finished as well.
Yeah, and you don't get a second chance at a first impression, and I think that is really important. I think there's, like we were saying, there's so much music that's out there that you have to just be really happy with and really kind of confident with what you've got. And the other thing that I think is important is, like, what's your story? So you need to find, not to be your X factor and be like, but to find something that's really interesting about your journey, or about what you're doing, or your sound, or whatever it is, something that's really unique to you, like your USP, whatever you want to call it. Because, like, that's the amazing thing about the internet now, is that it's so easy to self-release, but then that's the pro and the con, is that there's just so much that you need to find a way just to definitely, like, float on the top.
100%. So amazing.
So maybe we could move on to the questions,
right, so we had, I think we answered one earlier, so it's about how we do session work. Another question we had was, do you have any advice on how to find other musicians to collaborate with? Over to you.
Come to Songwriter. That's a great way to find other musicians to collaborate with.
This is very true.
Yeah, just honestly, I think the best thing that I ever did was just go to loads of open mic nights. just joined loads of different groups when I was still, at school. I just joined all the different groups that the music service had to offer. So I was in choirs, and I was in like the jazz band, like just anything that allowed me to be musical. And that kind of, I've still got people that I work with that I met, when I was 12 years old at Saturday morning music school. So just 100% just get into all the different groups that you can at school or wherever.
Sure. Amazing. Is there anything else? EJ, do you want to add anything maybe?
No, I'm good.
Cool. So the next question is, I would like a career in music. Would you recommend going to university after leaving school? I'm going to jump in with this one. So it completely depends where you go and what kind of career you want in music. For example, me as a singer-songwriter, I went to a place called the Institute of Contemporary Music Performance. It's a uni that's not as big as, for example, University of West London, for example. So you kind of get smaller class groups, and it's kind of a little bit more intimate. And I personally felt like I got more of a tailored kind of experience to me. And obviously, with class groups being smaller, you can interact with more people, I guess. Or you have the opportunity to do that more. But I loved it, because I met people, I met friends who are now, band members, and, other people that I know from different courses, or my course that I will network with, that I might songwrite with. And you kind of, obviously it all depends on how you interact with other people, but, you'll probably be friends with them for life. Especially if you work with them and you kind of create a good working relationship, a musical relationship, then that's great. And all the resources that we got from uni, even being able to record, session musicians, they're kind of all there. Obviously, there are more and you can interact with other people, but you don't have to go to music uni or uni to study music. It all depends on what you want to get out from it, I think. You've got to speak to people that have done both. So my opinion is that I really loved it, and I think it is a great thing to do, great place to be. That's just my opinion. So you guys,
I think it depends what kind of career you want as well. So if you can find people that you can reach out to who have, like, even if you have an idea of the kind of career you want, in which particular field and job, then if you can find people who are already doing that and kind of successful in their own way, then you can ask them the questions you need to about, like, did they go to uni, and even just like researching on Google, like, do you need to go to uni for this job, and then maybe looking around jobs around that as well, because you never know, like, you might want this job now, but something could happen, or you realize that you don't want to do that exact thing, but you might want to do something similar. So I think try not to be too narrow-minded in the job that you want, unless you've wanted it for loads of years and you think that's all you want to do. But I think researching that, and even you can go to uni open days and then ask tutors about it, or there's other ways of finding things out but not having to actually go to uni.
I also think there's no linear path to become a musician, and I say this all the time. Like, I have this conversation with people, like, if you go to university to become a doctor or a lawyer, you do your years, you graduate, you become that, and kind of what it is. With music, there is no, if you definitely go to university, you're going to definitely get a record deal, you're definitely going to become a musician. So I think you have to be really realistic in your expectations, and I think look at the different courses, look at what they offer, look at people who've graduated and the successes they've had, that kind of thing. And I think it's a really good idea just to be really open-minded about all the different types of courses that are out there. And also, my degree had a oh my god, what's wrong with me today? I had a part on teaching, and that was one of the modules that I decided to take. Modules, that's what I was looking for. And that was really positive for me, because, being a musician is a bit like this. So if you've got all of those different skills in the bag, then that's really, really useful. So I think it's it's about going with a really open mind and open eyes, and realizing that having a degree in music doesn't instantly mean becoming a musician. And then I have lots of friends who are really successful musicians who don't have degrees in music.
Of course. And I think just to add to that, if you do decide to go to music uni or go and study, you know, somewhere that has, you know, offers music degrees, but I'm kind of talking more on like specialist music universities, is the whole thing about just because you go there, just because, you know, you study there, doesn't guarantee you a job in the music industry. So it's all about what you put into it. And you know, you've got to, you know, you don't just go there and just, you know, that's it, I'm going to be a singer tomorrow, I'm going to be signed for a label tomorrow. You've got to interact with people. You've got to, I think, something like my advice to anyone who's about to go to university or is thinking about it is, I think you've got to make sure you get everything out of that uni that you can. Use all the resources, go to as many networking events, you know, ones that are, you know, affiliated with the university, or that you hear from, you know, other people. For example, Talyard, they do amazing networking events. Obviously, I don't know what the situation is now, but when obviously I assume things are running up back to how they were, then they would be offering more stuff like that. But I think, you know, it's, yeah, you just got to bear that in mind. I think that's really important. There was something else I was going to say, but I think we've covered all of that. So I think we've got one more question. So, okay, here we go. So I've released a debut album, I guess, during lockdown. Have you any tips on how I promote it to reach a wider audience? It's on various streaming platforms, and they've set up a Bandcamp page too. Let's start off with Victoria. I'm just trying to begin with that.
So if I just kind of self-recorded and self-released an album, I guess like I would go to local radio would be a really good place to start. See if you can get some kind of feature, or if you can do like a little kind of live loungy type thing. Obviously all the BBC introducing stuff, you can always submit music there. I think a lot of it as well is word of mouth. So get your friends to share. Like it's the easiest, cheapest thing for your friends to support you and your music, just by sharing it on their Facebook page or on their Instagram, or, you know, or whatever, or recommending it to someone else. And I think it's about trying to get that almost that kind of viral effect of it kind of spiraling. And I think that's where you know, independent music does so well. So get your friends behind you, especially on kind of a release date of a certain track. I do it all the time, even now. I will, you know, if my song gets a play, I will email and message my friends and be like, it's just been played, can you like tweet about it, or can you like this, you know? So it's all about, you know, we all do it, even regardless of where you're at. You know, I think it's just really important to get friends and family and that kind of thing behind your releases, and that's a real free way of promoting music.
Sure. Another few things that I've seen like during this period that, you know, we're in, is that if you've got fellow musician friends who are all kind of maybe do the same thing as you, then set up, like if you've got Instagram, for example, or Facebook, set up like a live stream, like concert, have different, like you would go to a gig and you have like a showcase of different artists. You might not know them before, but if you have friends, you know, that are doing the same thing, then just kind of set up like a concert and just have different slots. And, you know, that's how you can showcase your own stuff. You can be the headline act, because obviously it's your show as such. But I think doing that, and just, again, it goes to the creative ways of getting things out there. Like when you are on social media, you know, maybe think about the room that you're in. Maybe if you can get a nice backdrop, or if you can just have something in the background that just makes the video look interesting as well. Because when people see it, they'll be like, oh, that's cool. Oh, it sounds good too. Oh, cool, nice. I want to watch it again. Or what's that video they're doing this week? Oh, cool. You know, it gains interest. So I think just getting yourself out on every platform that you can, and being clever with it, and engaging with other people. Because like we said before, you know, if you've got a friend that you're playing guitar for, or you collaborated with, you know, they'll share it on their page. You know, you might gain followers, you might gain comments, stuff like that from that. So I think it's just using people who you know, not using, sorry, but just, you know, engaging with people that you know, because, you know, you can help each other as much as, in a way, you might be you know, they might be your competitors in a way, just naturally because everyone's trying to chase the same thing. But you know, you can help each other out, which is important as well.
I really believe that like there's enough space for everyone. So my big thing is that like any of my friends or anyone that I'm kind of even remotely linked to, if they release something, I will retweet, I will repost, like I would, because I just think we have to support each other, especially as kind of like, you know, independent musicians. So again, do that for other people and they will do it for you. And I think that's a positive. Create your own little musical family, you know, and just be really supportive of each other's music.
Sure. EJ, would you like to add anything?
No, you guys said it all.
Cool.
Sorry,
all right then. Yeah, we talk quite a lot. Lovely. All right. Well, I think that concludes everything. Thank you all for tuning in. I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed you guys, EJ and Victoria, as co-hosts as well. And so thank you very much. And that's it from us.
Thanks, guys. Bye bye.